Thank you. And once again, I want to say what a privilege it is to be here, and my gratitude not only for your bishop's invitation, but for his ministry of leadership in this diocese and across the church. I have the privilege of being his colleague in the House of Bishops. We were ordained in the same year as bishops, and so we've worked together for 11 years now, which has been an enormous grace. And I am just tickled to be here with you. All right, why are we here? We are here as Christians to serve God's mission. We are sent to heal and reconcile, to repair the world, to build the beloved community, as Martin Luther King Jr. put it. The goal is God's dream, set out, I think, most powerfully in the prophetic vision that Jesus claimed as his own in the 4th chapter of Luke. The Spirit of the Lord is upon me, because he has anointed me to bring good news to the poor. He has sent me to proclaim release to the captives and recovery of sight to the blind, to let the oppressed go free, to proclaim the year of the Lord's favor. And then Jesus sat down and said, "Today this is fulfilled in your hearing." Our work is to take our place in seeing that dream fulfilled today. The year of the Lord's favor is about the world God intended in creation. It's about restored relationship with God, humanity, and creation. It's a repaired world, as your bishop reminded you yesterday in the Hebrew phrase tikkun olam, the repair of all that is. It's a just society where human beings live in right relationship. It's human beings caring for the garden of God's creation, for all creatures and all creation. It means the ice caps stop melting. It means that island homes stop disappearing. It means that human beings can grow crops and harvest grapes in abundance. It means that God's children have plenty to eat and live full lives in peace because there is justice. Anglicans have a five-fold understanding of what that repair work looks like. And it's sort of the original digital presentation. 5 marks of mission, 5 road signs. Good news of the kingdom of God, that vision of a healed world that's bigger than all of us and needs each one of us to participate. To teach, baptize, and nurture new believers. To encourage and form participants and partners in God's mission. To respond to human need through loving service. And it's all of that kind of active work that Jesus himself was involved in, and we are as well. It's about feeding and healing and comforting the grieving. It's about visiting the imprisoned. It's about liberating the imprisoned. It's about teaching. The 4th one is transforming unjust structures of society, advocacy work. And the 5th one is about caring for the earth, caring for the earth. We start with the good news. What's the good news of the reign of God? Certainly what Jesus showed us himself as the beloved child of God, and what he claimed in us, that we are co-heirs, that we are also God's beloved. The good news is certainly what Jesus taught us in living on the road with no place to lay his head. Jesus is himself the going of God. He's the cosmic camper who tents with us. The good news is our brother Jesus, who invites us to take that road with him, even though it leads to Jerusalem and Calvary, and then on to Easter. The good news is, I am with you always, even to the end of the age. For he keeps meeting us on the road, even when we don't recognize him. The good news is our invitation to go, to engage in God's mission, to make disciples, baptize, and teach them, as he says, what I have taught you, which is about those other marks of mission, about God's dream, about loving service, about transforming injustice, about caring for the earth in the way he cared about storms and swine and the rest of creation. Mission is going, not staying. Mission means being sent. God's people are in some sense emitted into the world from the church. They are transmitted to transform brokenness. Mission is about life on the road rather than life in the camp. Our great stories have countless examples of being called from settled life to life on the road. Abraham was sent. Moses was sent to the Israelites. The Israelites are sent out of Egypt to a land of promise. The first Galilee, perhaps. John the Baptist is sent for the one who comes after. God's own self is sent into the world in Jesus, and Jesus sends us to heal God's world. God's people are sent from the camp to the tent, from Jerusalem to Galilee, from the pew to the street. We are meant to be pilgrims and wanderers without a place to lay our heads permanently. Life is meant to be an adventure. We are sent out to receive welcome. I experienced that at Starbucks this morning. Somebody offered to buy my coffee. Jesus says, eat what they set before you, and if you aren't welcomed, go on to the next town. Offer peace and healing and good news wherever you go. Now, the challenge is that we have lived in the camp for most of the last 1,700 years. We have built lots of structures, beautiful churches, cemeteries and seminaries. Rule books and governance systems. And most of them have been focused on building community in one place that doesn't change very much. We have done some good work. We have even done some very good work. And many among us have heard, "Well done, thou good and faithful servant." Yet as God's world has changed around us, we haven't always been ready to get up and go to new places and communities where God is already at work, where Jesus has already been before us. Now, we did make a very bold move in 1820 when we named ourselves the Domestic and Foreign Missionary Society. We knew at a very deep level that we are sent. We weren't going to establish mission societies to do the work on behalf of the rest of us. We said together, we are the missionary society. And like this new prayer book, we're still discovering what that means. We are currently structured mostly for life in the camp rather than life on the road. We make decisions deliberately and pretty slowly, rather than being ready to respond to urgent and emerging realities. We live as though we don't really expect much in the way of change or growth. We're mostly focused on regulation and predictability, like building an orderly city. The best image I know of an orderly city is Salt Lake. Those square blocks are all the same size. They're carefully numbered east to west and north to south. It's very easy to find your way around once you know the pattern. But the LDS remembered or discovered that ongoing liveliness depends on sending people out of their comfort zones and out of those predictable places. Our adaptive task is to discover or remember how to be missioners and travelers, roadies for the reign of God. That's the primary task of the people God sends. That mark on our foreheads is meant to be a push out the door that says, go. The strength of the church, its ability to be a powerful servant of God's mission, is its extent, its reach. The Anglican Communion is important because it's the third largest communication and distribution system in the world. It goes beyond the end of the road. It reaches to places that no other body does. When all the members of this body, Christ's body, are working together, the possibilities are out of this world. Christ's body can do more than anyone can ask or imagine. The parts of this body need some kind of support system. We rely on the Holy Spirit to keep us aware and coordinated and focused. And as a church, we're trying to be intentional about linking inspiration and concrete support. That's what your bishop was talking about yesterday in the shift of how the diocesan staff works. The structures like that in our church are a 24/7 travel agency for the missioners, the travelers. They're a resource bank for the tour guides. They're there to keep people in touch, equipped with the best and latest resources. They're there to share the latest news of justice and injustice, to share what we're learning about best practices and new skills, to encourage hospitality in strange places for travelers and for those travelers meet, to develop a movable feast, to serve in ways that individual parts of the body aren't capable of, to do big picture work that can't be done at all or as well as locally, and to act on behalf of the whole. Sometimes those staff are sent to far-seeing observatories on mountains or in satellites. They're there to coordinate with other traveling bodies, other members of the Anglican Communion, the Presbyterians, the North American Islamic Society. They're there for research and memory and resource development. Our job as those who are sent is really about cultivating more effective skills for living on the road and traveling light, as well as lightheartedly. We're meant to go as Jesus went, undefended. Dorothee Sölle was a German theologian who spent a fair amount of time in the United States, and she talked over and over again about the fact that Jesus went without the normal protections we often depend on. He went, he went without weapons. He didn't have a fixed home. His family depended on the people around him who shared his dream. He didn't have a permanent job. He didn't go with an army. He simply went and met people where they were. Our going has a great deal to do with our ability to be vulnerable, our willingness to keep asking how we can be more effective followers of Jesus and builders of the reign of God. We need a fundamental openness to learning from context and practitioners. We're meant to cultivate an ability to let go of our protective and isolating behaviors. You know, I love my headphones on the airplane, so I don't have to be disturbed. But I miss some things. I know I miss some things. We're meant to celebrate collaboration, which means that we're going to do a far better job when we partner with others. We're meant to focus on transformation, to expect that dreaded C word, change. We're meant to listen before we tell. You know, when Jesus healed people, he always asked, "What is it you want me to do for you?" We're meant to hear others into speech, as Nell Morton put it. And wherever we go, we're meant to see first the poor and the marginalized and the voiceless, God's treasure. There's a fancy theological word called kenosis that means an emptying, a self-emptying. We talk about Jesus, God's kenosis in Jesus, that Jesus is God's self-emptying, self-limitation. We're meant to give away what we've received. We're meant to work ourselves out of a job. What is it that each of us has to give away? Our vulnerability also takes shape in our vocation to equip the different parts of the body for fullest functioning, for maturity, growing up into the full stature of Christ. That's a little bit different than autonomy as radical individualism, at least as we understand it in the West. Our vulnerability also has to do with deconstructing the camp. Maybe, God forbid, getting rid of the pews. Changing the way we've always done it. Making space. Lightening the load. Thinking about our work as recycling. Taking the best of the past. Recycling some of the other for new function and new use in God's rebuilding. Looking at the members of the community in new ways. There's a small congregation, actually a tiny congregation on the banks of the Columbia River in Washington State that said a long time ago, "We don't let adults in this congregation do anything that children are capable of." Turn it upside down. This life on the road is meant to be adventure. It's about exploring, discovering the image of God in people we hadn't seen it before, discovering where God's Spirit has already been at work, where Jesus has been to visit before we got there. That adventure is about looking for new kinds of mileposts. That's one of the reasons we adopted the Millennium Development Goals as an image for our global mission. What it looks like to move toward the reign of God. Doesn't get us all the way there, but it says that it's important that people aren't starving. It's important that children aren't dying of preventable disease. It's important that mothers have health care around the time of birth so that both mother and child are healthy. It's important that all children have access to education. It's important that all the members of society have full dignity and ability to use the gifts God has given. It's important for us to partner for more effective trade, more just use of resources. I'd offer some other mileposts. Think about Mary's frequent statement, or the statement about Mary, that she took these things and pondered them in her heart. What is it you ponder in your heart? What is it you treasure in your heart? That's a road sign. It's essential that the adventure include thinking ahead, not just toward the ultimate goal toward which we're bound, but cultivating an ability to read the signs about what effective leadership looks like, about how these communities that are emerging might be best equipped and supported. It's thinking about stewardship in the way our Native American sisters and brothers often do, considering the gifts of the 7 generations before us and considering the implications of our stewardship for the 7 generations who will follow us. It's understanding ourselves as members of a much larger community, in traditional language, as part of the communion of saints. This journey is also meant to be about creative liveliness, maybe even playfulness, definitely about joy. That kind of joy is found when we're willing to risk all, including failure. We only find it when we're willing to be vulnerable enough to be co-creators with God, meaning that we don't know the outcome. We're meant to engage in and enable creative risk and experimentation. That is how God's creation works. If we're certain about the concept of free will, it applies to all of creation. God is not sitting in the sky pulling strings. God sets us free to participate in creation, and that means we can't control the outcome. But it also means that the outcome is far more interesting and exciting to discover. Faithfulness on this journey means becoming a goer, encouraging others to go with us in that journey toward repairing the world, on that journey home, which is where we're bound. It's called shalom, it's called salam, it's called the reign of God, it's called the beloved community, and community is foundational. We may have 5 marks of mission, but part of their gift is that we cannot accomplish them singly or alone. It requires community. We cannot be truly Christian alone. Indeed, we cannot be truly human alone. Our job is to go in company, as companions, literally with bread, with those who will share bread with us, to go in humility, acknowledging our connection with the earth, with the Creator, with all that is. Our task is to go and find that God has been there before us and looking for ways we can partner with what God is already doing in that place. Our job is to go sharing what we know of God with us. Emmanuel. Life in Galilee is life on the road. Happy trails.